didn't check last night. Did the Bears won last night?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Awful week in the pool. Yeah. We good? All set? All set, everybody? Good evening, everyone. Let me call the meeting of the City Council to order. The City Clerk will call the roll.
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Mr. City Attorney, do you have a closed session report?
I do, Mr. Mayor. The City Council met in closed session to address the issues that were reflected on its agenda. Specifically, it dealt with the Shelley case for suing the City of Newport Beach as Newport Yachts and authorized its defense by a 7-0 vote. And last week, it also authorized defense of the matters that were on the closed session agenda by a 6-0 vote as to the next, I was thinking about something else completely. The next G litigation, Councilmember Daigle having recused herself. So thank you.
Thank you. Will the audience please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Councilman Rosansky, and then I will lead the invocation. Please remain standing. Please join me in the pledge to our flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Lord God, your humble servants stand before you tonight. We ask for your divine guidance, we ask for compassion, and we ask for wisdom as we govern our city. We thank you for the many blessings that you've bestowed upon us in this land of plenty. We ask that you make us worthy of these blessings and that our work always serve to your glory. Amen. We are delighted to have some presentations tonight from the library. So let me invite our librarian, Cynthia Cowell, and the folks who are here with her to come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Today is a very special day in the life of the library and the city because I have the trifecta. I have hit the jackpot today, so to speak, and have gotten 3 very nice checks from 2 local support groups and our fans in Sacramento at the State Library.
2 of the 3 are probably good.
2 of the 3. Yeah, well, we're certainly happy about 2 of them, definitely. The first check I wanted to present to you, Mayor and Council, is an $11,000 check that basically they called us and said, please apply. We don't have enough applicants to take all of the money. So we said, well, we'll be happy to take $11,000 off your hands, and we bought some homework help software, which provides online tutorials, live homework help. And we really don't have to do anything but install the software. So that was a really good thing. It's a win-win situation for us. The next check I have to present, or actually will be presented by Tracy Keys, who's the Executive Director of the Newport Beach Public Library Foundation. She will be presenting a check to you for $156,000. And then I have folks from the Friends of the Library here who will be presenting to you a $240,800 check. So that, if you're doing the math, is over $400,000 in gifts to the library for programming. So without further ado, I'll ask Tracy to come and speak to the gift from the foundation.
I don't really have a speech. I'm just here to give money, so okay. I'm honored to be here on behalf of the foundation, and I want to thank publicly our 2,500 members who made the gift possible. So thanks for allowing me to give you money, and I think it's a testament to how exceptional our library is that we have 2,500 members. And recession or not, they keep giving. So I think that speaks very highly of our library. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Nancy Aconi, and I'm the manager of the Friends of the Library. With me is Susan, our president, Virginia Hayter, our vice president. Our store is open 7 days a week. We have 110 volunteers who worked over 15,000 hours this year. They did so because they enjoy people, love books, and are especially proud of our library. We could not accomplish what we do without supportive library staff and over 800 members of the Friends organization who join each year. Books are donated sometimes one at a time, by the bag full, and occasionally by the truck full. It never ceases to amaze us at the generosity of readers. A special thank you goes out to our community who donate the books for us to sell. They understand how important a library is. So it is with pleasure that we present $240,800.
The Friends of your bookstore is addictive. I think you're going to have, I need it, just say no. It's, I keep going in there and buying more books and buying more books. It's terrific.
Well, I did give you membership forms, and they're at each one of your desks, and a bookmark that tells our hours. So we'd love to see you down at the store.
Thank you so much. Tracy, don't go away.
Put it off the check.
Now you have to do yours. We have the last one.
You haven't heard anything at all about presentations to the CTPF members today? Somehow it's on the agenda. I'll just close it off. I don't see it here, do you?
Councilmember Gardner was very right about how addicting it is. Some of the best books I've read I picked up in the Friends Bookshop, so I encourage everybody to get there and check it out. Our next presentation is to a guy who has really been a stalwart in the community, who has hosted so many wonderful community events, and we are really going to be sorry to see him move and go to corporate and leave our city, but that's Paul Cahill, the general manager of the Newport Beach Marriott. If you have been to a civic event of any type recently, the odds are it was at the Marriott, who have graciously opened their doors for many, many events. So, Paul, if you'll come forward, let me read this resolution, and then I'll come down and present it to you. Whereas Paul Cahill has served as general manager of the Newport Beach Hotel and Spa, Marriott Hotel and Spa since 2007, and whereas Paul Cahill has been active and influential part of the Newport Beach business community, serving on the boards of the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce, Visit Newport Beach, Inc., and a member of the Commodores Club. And whereas Paul Cahill has supported numerous charitable causes important to the Newport Beach and Orange County communities throughout his role as general manager. And whereas Paul Cahill has been an influential voice in the city's tourism industry and was a driving force in creating Newport Beach Tourism Business Improvement District, which has allowed the city to better compete as a tourism destination. And whereas Paul Cahill has always strived to make Newport Beach a better city, a better place to work, and a better place to visit through his dedication to civic affairs. And whereas Paul Cahill is moving to join Marriott Hotels in a senior-level executive position in Washington, D.C., and will be missed by the Newport Beach business community, now I, therefore, Keith Curry, Mayor of Newport Beach, on behalf of the entire Newport Beach City Council, do hereby recognize and congratulate Paul Cahill. In witness thereof, I've set my hand and the seal of the City of Newport Beach this 28th day of September, 2010. Paul, your contribution to this city will be long remembered. We're going to miss you. We really admire the great job you've done at the hotel, and we wish you all the best as you go on to Washington and on to corporate.
Thank you very much.
Please get a photograph, and then we'll let you say some words.
Well, Mayor, while you walk down here, I first of all, I want to thank all of you for everything you've done for the city of Newport Beach. I actually feel like I shouldn't be here. You've dedicated so much of your lives to serve in the community, and it's been so easy for me to be part of this community for many years. I've lived in Newport Beach twice, and just happen to love it. I did see the agenda online, and I saw that there was the check presenting the three people prior to me. I didn't bring the check today, But certainly I appreciate the kind words, and it's a pleasure to serve the community here, and I thank my fellow colleagues in the hospitality industry. Some of our competition is sitting up there, but honestly, it's a pleasure to work with all these folks and you to really make this community a great community. Every day, since I've taken on this new role, I've watched the weather, I've looked at the ocean, and I thought, what am I doing leaving Newport Beach? So thank you. Hopefully I'll be back.
All right. Notice to the public. No, it's not going to happen. No.
The city provides a yellow sign-in card to assist in the preparation of the minutes. The completion of the card is not required in order to address the council. Speakers must limit comments to 5 minutes on agenda items. The council has a discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items. As a courtesy, please turn cell phones off or set them in the silent mode. Now is the time for council announcements or matters which council members would like placed on a future agenda for discussion, action, or report.
Thank you. Councilmember Daigle.
Yes, planning is underway for a celebration of the completion of the Upper Newport Bay Ecological Restoration Project, and Senator Dianne Feinstein will be present, and as you know, she wrote the legislation for the Senate, as will Congressman Ed Royce, who wrote the legislation for the House of Representatives. So it's looking like the first Saturday in November, and it'll be up at the Moose Center. So the city, our city staff and county staff is busy planning that, and it's going to be a great day in Newport Beach, and I hope you'll be able to join us, and more details to follow.
Councilmember Gardner.
I have 2 things. The first is a fun one. The Newport Beach Historical Society is presenting Tales of Body Balboa by someone I happen to know, a tribute to the surfing judge Robert Gardner, my father. It's Thursday, October 7th, cocktails at 6, dinner at 7, $30, and you can go online to get the information at newportbeachhistorical.com. The second, at the last meeting I had mentioned my concern about the Planning Commission minutes, and it didn't seem to strike a note, so I was ready to move on. And then a couple of things happened. One is I got a phone call the next day from someone saying, oh, you were so right. Of course, but... and then I got the packet for this meeting. And here it is. This is the Newport Beach Planning Commission meeting minutes for the China Palace use permit. Public comment was opened. Comments were given by the following. It lists 6 names. Public comment was closed.
It was very brief.
It doesn't say if they were in support, if they were against. This, to me, is an injustice to our residents. They come down, they take the time to come to a meeting to make their support or their protest known. There's nothing there. So then I got further involved, and I thought, well, you know, I get great minutes from the Coastal Bay Water Quality Committee, and we got good minutes from the EQUAC. And I went online, and some of our committees, you can get minutes from 2009, but you can't get anything for 2010 except the current meeting. And we pride ourselves on our transparency, but it seems to me we have some gaps here we need to fill. And whether we do better, take a different kind of minute or not, I think that I really would like, and I don't expect a study session or anything on it, but I really would like you as city manager to at least look at these and see if maybe there's some things we should do differently.
Nancy, you know, I think the minutes from our council meetings actually are fairly good, although they are summarized meetings. Would you be satisfied with that level of
Oh, yes, I don't
reporting?
expect,
Yeah.
but I mean, when people come down and you don't even know whether they supported the issue or were against it, that's really difficult.
It's really hard to create good summarized minutes. It's very hard to do, but I think we do it pretty well here for the council meetings. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And we do it for, as I say, I'm very happy with the minutes I get from a lot of the committee meetings, but the Planning Commission probably has the least amount of minutes of any of the committees or commissions that I've looked into.
I've asked Dana Smith to make a few comments on that, because we have been working on that.
Okay.
Just last week, the staff and myself, we met with the chair and the vice chair of the Planning Commission, and they shared actually similar comments, that they would really like to have minutes prepared that they can refer back to, that the council can fully understand what it is and why they've deliberated on particular items. So we are actually working on that. We will improve the minutes, and we will provide minutes to the council that may not be verbatim minutes, but I think will give you a sense of the deliberation that the commission has engaged in before an item gets to you. You're welcome.
Mr. Webb.
I have none.
Mr. Selich.
I have none.
Mr. Rosansky.
None, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Henn.
And none for me.
And I just have a couple. First of all, I want to congratulate Newport Harbor High on winning the Battle of the Bay this year. Good job. Councilmember Daigle and I participated in the statewide meeting of the California League of Cities in San Diego. I also had the privilege of welcoming the California Special Districts, who held their annual conference here in Newport Beach this past week. Councilmember Gardner and I attended the Coastal Cities Bike Coalition meeting at the invitation of Mayor Bob Foster in Long Beach. I think that's an exciting program that's moving forward. This last week, we celebrated the one-year anniversary of Newport Beach Magazine and the 9th-year anniversary of Riviera Magazine. Both of these publications give extensive coverage to our city and focus people on our restaurants and our tourist venues, and are very important to our local economy. And then Friday, I had the great privilege of opening the U.S. Lawn Bowling Open, which is being held in the Newport Beach Lawn Bowling Facility. We have people not only from all over the United States, but from all over the world, from Australia, from England, from Thailand, who have come and are competing this week here in Southern California. In this board, I had the opportunity to throw out the first jack. I just sort of like saying that. Not really sure what it meant, but I did it. But it's a great time. They look like a fun group, and 200 of them in our hotels and in our restaurants this week having a good time. And then finally, as you know, we've had our soft opening for the Oasis Senior Center. If you haven't been there, what a wonderful facility that is. And the grand gala grand opening will happen on October the 9th at 2 o'clock with our opening ceremonies. I encourage everybody to come out and really see this new community resource that we have that I think you're really going to appreciate. All right, with that, let's go to the consent calendar.
All matters listed under consent calendar, items 1 through 22, are considered by the council to be routine and will all be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. The council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending an action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the council votes on the motion unless members of the council, staff, or the public request specific items to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Members of the public who wish to discuss a consent calendar item should come forward to the lectern upon invitation by the mayor and state their name and item number. If the optional sign-in card has been completed, it should be placed in the box provided at the podium.
Thank you. Any items to pull? Councilmember Selich.
I have none.
Councilmember Rosansky.
None, none, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Henn.
Nothing to pull, but did we get an answer on item number 9 as to Mr. Woolley's place of residence?
Yes, we did. He does reside in Newport Beach. My recommendation would be to go ahead and approve the agreement if that's the council's desire. At this time, we'll address any issues that, if there are any objections to his hearing any matters. At any rate, we would have him available to hear matters that were not subject to any objection, and some reasonable accommodation hearings that we do have presently pending.
Councilmember Daigle.
None.
Councilmember Gardner.
Nothing?
Councilmember Webb.
Nothing.
I'm going to pull item 5 just to make some brief comments. Is there anything to pull from the staff, Mr. City Manager?
Some corrections, Mr. Mayor, but not to pull. On item 4, the second reading that should say October 26th, not 25th. And then secondly, item number 21, the gentleman's name you would be confirming to nominations for the Bicycle Safety Committee is not Scott Matzler, but Sean Matzler. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Does any member of the audience have any item on the consent calendar they would like to have pulled? Please come forward.
W.R. Dilding, item 12.
12, thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, let me bring it back to the council. Is there a motion?
There is, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of consent calendar items 1 through 22, except items 5 and 12, and noting the corrections to items 4 and 21.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion and second. Please vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. On item 5, we have previously gone in on record in support of this when it was in the circulation mode, and I would note both the Councilmember Gardner and Mayor Pro Tem Henn have been active in the signature collection to qualify Proposition 22 for the ballot. This is the statewide amendment that prevents the state of California from taking funds from from local governments. This is critically important for cities throughout the state, including ours, to protect our highway funds, to protect our general funds, our property taxes, our sales taxes, from being used by the state to balance their own budget. They have acted, they have not solved their own problems, and they have been knocking on the doors of local government to take money away from us, from the vital services that we need to provide, police, fire, and other public safety services here. So this resolution puts us once again on record in support of Proposition 22, which is on the November 2nd ballot, and I would move approval. Any further discussion? Anyone from the audience wishing to speak? Seeing none, please vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Item number 12, Mr. Dildine.
Thank you. I was quite startled, excuse me, when I saw the agenda that you're awarding a contract for $157,000, when the bid, in fact, came in at $145,000. The actual bid form, I went over and purchased a copy of from Public Works today, spelled out is $145,000, and also that why are we doing this? I was told that when they put this was a description by type of work, they put it into their spreadsheet, and they found out that there was an error. It totaled 157. I ran a tape. It's done the same thing. There is relief for a contractor to inform you that he has made a mistake and ask that his bid be withdrawn. I do not know if he asked for that, but the question is, why are we telling him it's his responsibility? Having been in the business for umpteen years, I've lost a lot of money because of the old methods of before cell phone and laptop computers and sitting in a phone booth trying to put a bid together at the last minute. Things are much more sophisticated today. I also have problem with the fact that according to the Contractor State License Board, this individual is a sole proprietor. On all the documentation, it is signed, he's printed out a name, and then signatures, looks like a rubber stamp type of thing, manager. Does this manager have the legal authority to obligate this corporation? There's avenues I can pursue to find out if that is true or not, but I just question that. The other thing is, in the other documents that I obtained from the fellow that filed the protest, the name that's on many of these notarized documents, Michael Sturgeon, is nowhere on any of the bid proposals. It's quite coincidental in my mind as to that the notary also has the same last name. I'm just wondering if this is a legal and binding contract. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Please come forward.
Hi.
Please state your name, please.
Hi, my name is Michael Sturgeon. I am the manager of M&E Construction, who is the low bid on item number 12. The city persons asked me to come down to the meeting tonight because we are the low bidder, and the second bidder, I would imagine it is that gentleman who just left. I don't know who he is, but the second bidder, he protested our bid, saying that we were non-responsive. We wrote a 17-page letter to the city and gave it to them. Once they reviewed our letter, they asked us to provide the payment and performance bonds their certificate of insurance. They ask us to execute the contract. We've done all of those things. Our bid is responsive. If anyone of the council members has any questions about what the gentleman said, I would be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Badum, do you have any illumination on this topic?
Yeah, I guess just to clarify Mr. Dildane's comments, the way we set our bid documents, they say that the written words on the bid sheet govern over the numbers. So when you go back and you look at the various items and you actually multiply out those numbers based on those bid words, the number did change. So that's the reasoning behind the change in the 145 versus the 157. So that is standard policy. That's what we do. We check all the bids. We look for math errors. And again, the low bidder did not request to be exempted from this process. So we checked their documents. They did respond, as the gentleman just mentioned. He did respond to all of the claims that were made in the second bidder's protest. We were satisfied with those answers, and we're fully prepared to award the project tonight.
Can I ask a question?
Councilmember Carter.
Is it common for the numbers and the words to be different?
It does happen, yes.
Okay, so it's not just a unique
Yeah, and I think as
situation.
Mr. Dildane mentioned, the process back in the days when he was doing it, where everyone was doing it at the last minute, they still do that, and mistakes do get made. And fortunately for this gentleman, it wasn't damaging for this individual as far as his bid. He still was the low bidder, but we've had bidders that have been thrown out because that they thought they were the low bid, but when we calculated the numbers, they weren't. So it does happen quite a bit, actually.
Thank you. Mr. Hand.
And Steve, is there anything in the handling of this bid that is different than you would ordinarily have done in light of the circumstances? Is there anything unusual about how you've handled it?
No, this is very typical, this process, and we do get protests from now and then, and we investigate them diligently, and we have not found any reason not to believe that this isn't a legitimate and responsible bid.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the audience who would like to speak on this matter? All right, seeing none, let me bring it back.
I move the recommended actions to award the contract.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion at the council? Seeing none, please vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Oral reports from city council members on committee activities. Councilmember Daigle.
Yes, our Citizens Aviation Committee met yesterday at the library. We had a really strong showing from the community, and we heard a presentation from a professor from UCLA who had completed a study on air quality. The study did conclude that the various particles that would be emitted from aircraft are within federal standards, so they are in compliance. So we probably won't be doing any further studies in that area, but I think we may be looking at a water quality study, just so we comprehensively look at our environmental impacts.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gardner.
Nothing?
Councilmember Webb.
I have none.
Councilmember Selich.
No reports?
Councilmember Rosansky.
None, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Hand.
2 reports, Mr. Mayor. We had a meeting of the Economic Development Committee, and the committee decided at its meeting to form a subcommittee that will address the business license issue here in Newport Beach, really looking into how we set the fees and on what basis we charge fees for business licenses. And so that'll be a good undertaking for that group. Then we had a presentation from the film festival. Todd Corderero gave it, and on behalf of Greg Schwenk. The film festival this last year was a very successful event with over 50,000 people in attendance, which was approximately the same as last year despite the economy, and up about 20% from 2 years ago. So they held their own really quite well. This event generates millions of dollars of publicity value for the city of Newport Beach, almost all of which is favorable as they get many, many hits in lots of media, national magazine as well as televised media. And so it certainly is, it speaks well for our city, and it's clearly one of the keystones of the arts and cultural environment here in Newport Beach. And so we really appreciate the hard work and the job well done for this year's film festival. And then we had a finance committee meeting. I want to stop for a moment and just comment for a little bit here about the committees that we operate here. Most of these committees are chaired by a member of the City Council. Some of them are citizens advisory committees. But in all cases, these committees, in my view, have very strong membership and do a very good job stewarding the city's affairs for the particular areas that are under their purview. In the case of the Finance Committee, I chair that committee. I've had a 30-year career as a Chief Financial Officer of publicly held companies, New York Exchange-listed companies, and I think that gives me a pretty good perspective on corporate governance, financial matters, budgets, and the like. Another member of that committee is Keith Curry, who is a nationally recognized expert on municipal finance, which is a skill that is particularly handy these days for the city of Newport Beach. And then Council Member Leslie Daigle, who has a very strong background in land use planning and actually did work for the city of Newport Beach once before and has been a very well-interested and strong contributor to that committee. This is a very strong group that is charged on behalf of council to administer and follow and monitor the financial affairs of this city. And I'm happy to report that the city's financial affairs are in excellent condition today, due not so much to the committee, but to the good work of our staff along the way. The committee at its latest meeting, just to give you an example, reviewed the investment policy for the city. We invest in the range of $100 million pretty much every day of the week in terms of our reserves. It's important that we have a policy that's well structured. We also talked about several the cost-saving initiatives that staff is pursuing. This happened to be financial staff. And we had a budget update for the fiscal year ended June 30th, which the public might recall was a difficult year for us. We had to cut $8 million out of the budget pretty much on the fly at the last minute. And as we started the fiscal year, to staff's great credit, they were able to accomplish that and actually a little more. We finished the year in the black, so to speak, against that goal, having actually exceeded the targeted level of cuts. And that left us with a level of financial reserves that was excellent at year end as well. And so these are the kinds of things that we address on behalf of council and on behalf of the residents of Newport Beach. The Finance Committee is a very active committee, meeting at least once a month. And I guess I forgot one other thing. We reviewed the timeline for the Civic Center and the financing plans for that at this last meeting. So I'm pointing this out because this is a good example of committee work that goes on here for the city that is a very important part of the stewardship of our city in between council meetings. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Hinn. I have no report, so we'll move on to public hearings. First one is item 23, Airport Business Area Integrated Conceptual Development Plan. Mr. Kiff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'd note, too, as we start potentially two public hearings, the second one, the item 24, the applicant has asked for a continuance on that. So if anyone from the public is here for the item 24, I would expect council to grant that continuance for 45 days. Getting back to item 23, this is the Airport Area Integrated Conceptual Development Plan. This will be a public hearing, so the public has an opportunity to testify. Typically, we go through a staff presentation, and then the applicant can speak, and then typically the mayor would open that up to the public. So Sharon Wood, the special projects consultant to the city, has been working on this project with Roz Ung. So when Sharon and Roz are ready, we'll be ready too.
I think we can, good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I think we can start without the pictures. We don't need them immediately. And here they are. This conceptual development plan is something that is required by one of the policies in our general plan land use element, which was adopted when we were struggling with trying to figure out how the 550 additive units that would be allowed in the area bounded by Birch, MacArthur, and Jamboree, how those would be allocated. So this policy requires a conceptual development plan prior to the regulatory plans, which would be the plan community text or specific plan zoning would be adopted for each of those properties. The applicants, I know, are intending to give the council a detailed presentation on their proposals, so I won't go through those details as well, but instead I'd like to summarize the staff's analysis of the plan's consistency with the general plan, which was the focus of our look at it. We believe that this integrated conceptual development plan is consistent with the general plan policy overview for the airport area, which says that residential opportunities should be developed as clusters of residential villages centering on neighborhood parks and interconnected by pedestrian walkways. And you can see here that on the Cole property, the park is here, surrounded by residential in these areas. And on the Connexent property, the Central Park is located, I don't think it could be more centrally, surrounded by residential uses. And the pedestrian walkways are shown in this location here, 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 in this location, and here, and then another one in this direction connecting to these existing amenities. Both of the villages, the Cole Village and the Connexent Village, meet the minimum size requirement of the general plan, which is 10 acres. The Cole Village is 12.7 acres, and the Connexent Village is 25 acres. The general plan calls for residential densities in the range of 30 to 50 dwelling units per acre. Coles comes in at 44 units per acre, and Connexent is just a tiny bit under the 50 units per acre. We also think that these plans demonstrate compatible and cohesive integration of new development with existing non-residential uses, as the general plan calls for. In the case of Cole, the existing surface parking would be replaced with subterranean parking, or in some cases some limited surface parking. And both general plan policy and the statements in the integrated conceptual development plan require that that parking be replaced one for one. The Cole plan maintains the existing vehicular access from Birch and out to Von Carmen, as we have today with existing driveways. And it also maintains integration with both existing amenities, such as the lake park that I noted earlier, and also amenities off-site, some of the restaurants, and there's connectivity between the two properties. And I believe that's one of the things that the applicant will have some more details to show you. For the Connexent property, I think integration with existing uses is a bit less of an issue because the plan is to replace all of the industrial and office development with residential. But in the interim, if it's developed in phases, the specific plan will have to address how those new residential uses are protected from the existing uses. But once again, we are maintaining existing access points on Jamboree and up to Birch, as well as connections to existing amenities in the area. With regard to neighborhood parks, both of the neighborhood parks that I pointed out earlier comply with the general plan's policies for the size of the park. In Cole's case, it's a little over 1 acre, and in Connexent's case, a little bit over 2 acres. The general plan policies also call for streets and pedestrian ways that will break up large blocks, improve connections within the conceptual development plan area and between that area and surrounding properties. And these streets and pedestrian ways are supposed to follow the illustrative concept presented in General Plan Figure LU-23, which is on the left here. And it's important to remember that this is a conceptual and illustrative plan. It was never intended to be a strict regulatory diagram. It's a way that things might happen. But still, this conceptual development plan stays very close to it. If we look at Cole, there is a connection shown from Birch all to Von Carmen, and then potentially all the way to MacArthur if the residential village should be expanded. This is not quite large enough, but we are still showing that this connection occurs here. And if there should be residential development on this side of MacArthur in the future, there's nothing in this conceptual development plan that would prevent the connection from continuing through here from Von Carmen to MacArthur. On Connexent, you can see that the scale of the blocks has been broken up by all of the streets and paseos, so it's now a more residential scale than exists today with the super blocks. As I mentioned earlier, the connections to Jamboree and Birch are shown very similar to the way they're shown here in the general plan diagram. One slight change is that in this general plan diagram, the connection to Von Carmen is shown in this location, and it's a little bit further south in the conceptual development plan. And that was to be able to use an existing easement rather than having traffic in what is a parking lot aisle at the moment. And also on Connexent, it would be possible in the future to have this extension down to MacArthur if a residential village were ever extended into that area. So with all of that analysis, staff believes that this conceptual development plan is consistent with our general plan policies. In terms of environmental review, we prepared an initial study and concluded from that our general plan EIR adequately analyzed all of the impacts of this conceptual level plan and that no further review is needed. The Planning Commission held 2 public hearings on this on July 22nd and September 9th. At the first hearing, they requested that some changes be made to the plan, and those changes were made by the applicants. The Planning Commission was satisfied that their concerns had been addressed, and they recommended that the City Council approve the plan. They recommended some changes in language to the plan itself, and you can see those in the Planning Commission resolution. So with that, staff is recommending that the City Council approve the plan so that we can enable the property owners to move on to the next step of preparing their regulatory plans and implement this section of the general plan. And I am available for questions.
Questions for Sharon?
Could you sort of lead us through, if the conceptual plan is approved, what sort of documentation, what other things will be presented to the public as the plans are refined, so that where the public input comes in, where the council comes in, where the planning commission comes in? We don't just go from the conceptual development to building.
No, and in this conceptual development plan really doesn't confer entitlement to build anything on the applicants. It really serves more as a guide for them in how to develop their regulatory plans. The general plan didn't say specifically what kind of zoning document would be used in this area, so it's really up to the applicants in this city what kinds of documents we will use. Cole is preparing an amendment to the planned community text, which is the zoning that covers all of this property right now. Connexent has chosen to do a specific plan because they're doing more street and paseo improvements, and so that was a more appropriate vehicle. Those would both serve really as the zoning regulations for the residential development to occur in the future. It's our intent to prepare environmental impact reports on each of those. Both of those would go to the Planning Commission for public hearing and then to the City Council for public hearing and action. The general plan and the municipal code both also require development agreements for residential developments of this magnitude in this area. So each of the property owners would need to negotiate a development agreement with the city. The terms of that development agreement would be among the things that are analyzed in the environmental impact reports, and those would also be reviewed by the Planning Commission as well as the City Council.
Mr. Webb.
May I just quickly, Ms. Wood, while you're still up there, to what extent does this actually bind the council to future development grants of entitlement or regulatory documents, if at all?
I don't think it does any more than the general plan does.
I think that's an important thing to keep in mind in light of the CEQA objections that have been raised, that you're not bound to, you have further discretion when the regulatory documents come before you. You will be presented with full environmental review at the time the regulatory documents come forward.
Since this is a combination residential and other uses, and it's supposed to be very pedestrian friendly, was it just maybe an oversight that we didn't mention bicycles along with pedestrians? Sometimes we need to get a little bit more room if we're going to have bicycles and pedestrians within the facility, so that should we perhaps be mentioning that along with the pedestrian notations in the guidelines?
I think that was an oversight, and interestingly, I think it was probably an oversight when we were drafting the general plan policies as well, because they refer to vehicular and pedestrian linkages, but I don't remember seeing bicycle there either. But certainly that can be added to the conceptual development plan and make sure that we implement it as part of the regulatory plans.
Thank you. Any other questions for Sharon? If not, then let me open the hearing and invite the applicant to come forward. Or applicants, I guess, Miss.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. Jeff LaPlastria. I'm appearing on behalf of Connection Systems, the co-applicant in the plan before you this evening. In 2006, after a long and I guess at times fairly contentious process that we all went through, the residents of the city voted to update the general plan. Among other goals, the plan called for up to 2,200 new housing units in the airport area. This is to advance the general plan goals of providing a variety of housing options to the citizens of Newport Beach, and also to enable Newport Beach, which has few remaining residential development sites, to meet its goals under the regional housing needs assessment. It also prescribed a stepped approval process for landowners such as Connection to go through in order to procure the appropriate land use entitlements. The first step in this process is the plan before you for consideration this evening. It's a conceptual plan, as Ms. Wood said, for the triangle area, which includes the 25 acres of the Connection property. We have been working since 2007 to implement this plan on a Connection site in cooperation with COAL. This is just the first small step towards a project, a conceptual plan, to provide the big picture coordination between COAL and Connection. We have worked very diligently with COAL Company and staff in particular to generate the document, and we asked for your support of the plan this evening. As you are probably familiar with the process, and again, as Ms. Wood said, we will come back with a regulatory plan. In our case, it'll be a specific plan and an EIR, which will be submitted subsequent to approval of the integrated plan, which will provide the city with the specific project details. Ms. McDermott will make the presentation of the plan. Representatives of Connection and our legal counsel present and will be available following Ms. McDermott's remarks to address specific questions relative to the Connection plan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Carol McDermott of Government Solutions and representing the coal company, and very pleased to be doing the presentation really on behalf of both landowners this evening. And to that end, we have prepared a PowerPoint and hope that you will find it illustrative of the issues that you're being asked to approve this evening, and our desire and abilities and commitment to resolving those issues. We want to just emphasize that the plan that was approved by the public in 2006 included policies for the infill development in the airport area. Most of you sat through those public hearings, and certainly Councilman Gardner led a 6-year process of the General Plan Advisory Committee leading to this very thoughtful determination. And as part of that, the extensive public hearings were held during the general plan update process after the committee made their recommendations. There was considerable publicity to the community about these public hearings, and community input was extensively solicited. And it acknowledged that it would introduce residential and mixed uses into the airport, and it identified it as urban in character and providing for increased economic vitality. In other words, updating a project that had been in existence and been developing since 1972. It also allows for the cohesive residential villages to be integrated with business park uses. And part of that is really going to happen in the regulatory plan when we get to the level of detail, because this is conceptual. But it requires this plan, and it requires it in order to demonstrate connectivity, to allocate the units. And that's what this conceptual plan is doing. And we are able in that plan, and staff has concurred, that we have demonstrated compatible and cohesive integration, and we're demonstrating how the pedestrian and the vehicular connections will occur. The IDCDP does reflect a refinement of a previous plan that was looked at about a year ago, and we were able to demonstrate the compliance with the general plan, and we're demonstrating the connectivity, and of course allocating, but it describes the implementation, and I think that it's very important in that implementation as set forth in the plan that you have in your packets and that have been made available to the public, that that implementation will describe and address a number of things, including parking. And it will demonstrate that all costs of these improvements will be absorbed by new development and will not create costs for existing property owners within the Cole area. And you've seen the aerial as indicated by Sharon Wood, and this is the general plan development area. And this is a more specific component of it. And then, of course, when we start to outline the way in which this development plan occurs, we would point out that these are existing buildings and a parking structure that exist on the Cole portion, and of course under a phase plan all of the existing development would be demolished, so that we end up in a situation where Cole would be introducing only 260 units into this area, and then because we are doing only the additive, and that additive number of units was allowed in the general plan, and then Connexent will pick up units that are both additive and replacement, as we'll discuss in just a quick moment. As an overview, we've worked together for this cohesive integration. We are providing both existing amenities for a neighborhood and a community, and we're linking those residential amenities for both the offices and the future residences. And we're creating pedestrian connectivity that can, in fact, accommodate bicycles, and that will be demonstrated in the regulatory plan. And we'd like you to know that we're using a common landscape architect to ensure the cohesion between the two ownerships and to allow for pathways and so forth that won't come to abrupt ends, that will have an appropriate connectivity and continuity. So how does that connectivity work? Well, interestingly, outside of the boundaries of this area, there is a very long-term existing hotel now, the Fairmont. There is a Pacific Club, a private club that draws from a great deal of the businesses in the area, providing both recreational and dining amenities. The retail that exists on the corner, extending from Burger King and down to Starbucks and giving restaurant choices in the area. And then there's also a fine dining restaurant and an extensive gymnasium over in the fitness club on the opposite side of the street. So there's lots of things that make this possible for a good infill project and that will enhance the quality of this residential and business complex to update the area. So in addition, we've created our own amenities with the proposed neighborhood park. We have an urban plaza that provides pedestrian connectivity in this location that will utilize the amenities that exist and enhance them further. There will be a pocket park on the connection site in this location. Their neighborhood park in this location, and an additional park at the lower end of their development, as well as landscape paseos within the development. So you combine what we're proposing on-site with those in the surrounding area, and it really does start to meet the criteria for a viable mixed-use community. So how does this connectivity work? We thought it would be very helpful to put into the record and to assure you that our regulatory plans will go into much greater detail here in these locations. And this is the areas of connectivity between the two landowners. So an example of what they would look like in these two areas would be this kind of a paseo that does separate parking areas but makes it an attractive walkway and wide enough to accommodate good pedestrian usage, including bikes. And that can be done in a variety of ways. So the urban design aspects of that will be concluded in the regulatory plan, and certainly not at this point in the conceptual plan. But these are elements that will provide a pedestrian path, visual connection, use of vertical elements as wayfinding, and visual interest through textured paving and colors. So then we have another kind of connectivity at this location, and it is the more vest pocket type park, but it presents opportunities to do a variety of things. So a office worker or a residential resident could walk across this drive aisle into a park setting and connect over to the residential and or park areas and the connection from the coal site. And it could take on a variety of treatments such as are shown here. And again, providing the same kind of comfortable environment for gathering and relaxation as well as connectivity. And then this one has a little different characteristic, but once again, showing that we're creating a sense of arrival when you get from Cole to Connexent, and that we're providing paving and landscaping to create the visual interest and to create different ways to address that relationship. And then at the southerly end of the Connexent site, there are two elements. One is a park that's proposed, and the other is an existing access easement. While currently there is a gate that blocks that access, that this driveway currently exists both in this direction and in both the north and south direction, and that gate would be opened and be available as the traffic study might dictate in the future under the regulatory plan. So back to the integrated conceptual development plan, Sharon, I believe, outlined the characteristics of the circulation, but we are maintaining on the coal site the vehicular access points that currently exist in these locations. And Connexent has a signalized access on Jamboree. They have a secondary access here, and they have an easement that is unrestricted that allows access out to Birch. Their main streets are in the white. Their paseos and connections to their parking structures for the residential areas are in this buff color. But the plan, although conceptual, has been determined to be capable, particularly in the coal setting, of replacing existing parking and, in fact, enhancing the parking available to these office buildings, many of them who are renting spaces for their employees to park in a parking structure here, and they will be able to have parking in our parking structures as a part of our agreement to replace them at no cost to those owners.
Carol,
Yes.
That was actually my question, so I'm just going to ask it now. So where is that parking going to go? Is it going to be like underneath those residential buildings? Is that
Yes, thank you, Councilman. I'd be happy to explain that. In this location, for example, there will be underground parking under this entire park and residential structure. The business owners and/or their tenants and guests will enter into the parking structure in this location. The residences will enter into the parking structure here. So we're able to segregate those uses, and then we provide covered parking for that replacement parking. In this case, the two residential developments will have driveways into each of them, and they will provide just the residential parking. But for example, there will be elevator wells in several locations here so that an office worker could come in here, park, and pop up here and go to their office building. Or they could pop up here and walk across to this one. Similarly, in this case, we are retaining the existing field of parking, which is an important component to the way it relates to this being the tallest building on the properties. So the idea is that we have determined as a result of the conceptual planning that's been done by William Hesmahalk, and their architect is here tonight, but on the one hand, we had to do enough detailed planning to determine we could accommodate all of the replacement parking. On the other hand, the specifics of that still have to be worked out in the final designs as we go forward in the regulatory plan.
Just out of curiosity, because I know, and I'm sure we'll be hearing about it later tonight, I guess from a going forwards from here standpoint, I mean, there's different property owners in there that own these different office buildings? And,
yes, there are.
Yeah, and so, I mean, how do you see the steps moving from here to some development?
Sure.
As far as getting, you know, because I understand the issue is, you know, these parking lots, reciprocal easement agreements, and what do you think is the process for accomplishing that?
Yes, well, as we begin the regulatory plan, which will include an environmental impact report, by the way, we will be working with each of the property owners to talk about what their needs are, how we can better address their parking than what is existing there now. Our CC&Rs allow for that flexibility, and our attorneys have vetted that issue over and over with materials that they presented to the city clerk's office. Obviously, CC&Rs are a private issue between owners, but the coal company has confidence that they have the flexibility within those CC&Rs to adjust the parking as long as it's replaced. The Integrated Conceptual Development Plan itself on page 4 has a paragraph that relates to the requirement for replacement parking. And in fact, we are committed to meeting with each of those owners. Now, we have done outreach to a number of them, and we're a little surprised at a last-minute letter this evening. But nonetheless, we have attempted that, and it's interesting because each one of the owners has has different management firms, different ways of dealing, different availabilities, and there has not been frankly, a very cohesive response for our efforts. We recognize that as we go into the regulatory plan, that we will have a much more coordinated outreach to these individual property owners to ensure that we are relating both to their existing property as well as to the new opportunities which we're bringing, which is going to create housing, which is increase property values, and that will really protect adjacent development. For example, one of the things that we heard from property owners, particularly along this area, was they did not want a lot of vehicle integration between the two sites because of the way in which this exists as a quiet office park. And so to that end, we worked with the Planning Commission and with the designers, and Conexant and Cole agreed that there would not be vehicular access points here as may have been originally envisioned because it would be disruptive. And so the idea is that we're working to ensure that we minimize the disruption and that we can work with those property owners to ensure that that occurs throughout the development.
Thank you.
The other thing that the plan does is it provides for a unit allocation summary. And in your document, I just wanted to clarify and point out that the coal company will be doing 260 additive units, Conexant will be doing 290, And within the additive units, that utilizes the total 550 units allowed by the general plan in the airport area. At the same time, Connexent is providing up to 632 replacement units because of the demolition that will occur on their site, and there are traffic neutral provisions, and there are also conversion factors which they have taken into account and which their preliminary review shows that they would be eligible for. And of course, the EIR in the regulatory plan would be clarifying that even further. They also are eligible for density bonus units for the provision of additional and lower income affordable units or workforce housing, which are certainly very important and was an important component of the plan. And so that workforce housing could be provided up to 322 units for a total on Connexent of 1244, again, to be validated and analyzed both from a traffic and other perspectives in the EIRs that will follow that will go along with the regulatory plans. So that comes to a total of 1,504 units. Now, obviously, those units will be phased over time. We've designed the coal plan to allow for very convenient phasing, we believe, and Connexent's plan also allows for ways to do that as the existing uses on the Connexent industrial site are phased out. And again, as we look at this plan, we just want to further emphasize the conceptual nature. Now, it looks perhaps more detailed than conceptual, but because of the number of aspects that we had to address, we had to do a great deal of information. We developed a lot of information, but then demonstrate that we could meet all of the general plan policies, which resulted in this plan. But it is nonetheless conceptual, and yet it sets forth the framework within which the regulatory plans can be prepared. The coal company is doing an amendment to the planned community text because we will be respecting the rights of the existing property owners and ensuring the protection thereof. In the case of the Connexent site, they will be doing a specific plan because their plan is really developed along the basis of ultimately eliminating all of that existing industrial uses. So those two techniques are available to both of us because of the differing circumstances, but we will both have to be consistent with the concepts contained herein and continue to create the greater level of detail in the regulatory plan. So in conclusion, I hope that you'll agree that we provided a cohesive conceptual urban design, that we've met the connectivity requirements, that the units are allocated as required, and that we have implemented the general plan policies for the mixed use in the airport area. And what this is doing is really creating an opportunity for private investment with the public guidance that has come through the general plan process, going back to the many, many meetings by the General Plan Advisory Committee, and then the many, many hearings of the general plan update process that culminated in a vote by the citizens to ensure that residential could be and should be allowed in this location. So as we proceed with our regulatory plans, we'll be providing greater level of detail. We will be required to be in substantial conformance with this plan. And I would also just add some interesting points here because this plan is going to ensure that there is access out to Birch. It's going to ensure that bicycles are addressed in the regulatory plans. And we will also be able to demonstrate in those regulatory plans, which you will be able to see in public hearings, that Connexent, for example, has an opportunity to significantly reduce water usage as well as sewer usage. I don't know how many of you know how extensive that is in the industrial operations, but they will be extensively reduced as a result of the residential changes. And both properties are really going to substantially be able to reduce water runoff and to increase water quality. So I think that there are a lot of advantages that these projects bring, and we would respectfully request your approval and we would also respectfully request a right for rebuttal to the extent that other questions are raised during the hearing process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. Let me invite anyone else who'd like to, how many people would like to speak on this matter tonight? Can I see a show of hands, please? Just so I get a sense of this. Okay. Let me invite you to come to the podium, please, and make your comments. If we could limit them, please, to 5 minutes, and we'll move right along.
Thank you. My name is Kyle Weichert. I'm with Stone Ridge Capital Partners. You probably received the letter late notice tonight. I'm just going to speak on a few of the issues that we have with this plan. And with all due respect to Cole, we did try to meet with them last week, and they did show us the plan and went through some of the proposals. And we just had a few issues. One of them was the parking impacts to our property. I don't have a laser pointer. I use that one. Great. 4350 is this building here, and my hand shaking. Currently there's parking along this area here, all this here. This street comes in through here and comes down this way. So one of our big issues is just the parking impacts and how that's going to be handled. In our meeting with Cole, they did tell us that the parking wasn't to be replaced and that they would handle that issue in the next stage. And, with all due respect to Cole, I can't advise the building owner to just go along with the plan and trust what Cole's doing at this point, because we don't have anything mitigated or documented at this point. So that's one of our issues. The second issue is the circulation impacts, just with the sort of the main entrance here being switched from here over to here, coming straight at our building. We feel that might be not good for us as building owners. Secondly, the gates. The gates are going to be switched around that we're all used to using, and the fact that we might be parking within the parking structure that's shared with the residential units over here, whether they're multifamily or for sale. We think that's a little bit different than parking on surface parking that's right across the street from our building. And we don't know how that's going to be handled in terms of splitting up the parking garage or how that works. That wasn't shown to us, so we're a little bit concerned about that as well. And then lastly, the staging and the phasing of the development. There's obviously not a lot of room to wiggle within the Cole Center here. And Cole did mention that they were going to rent property from CONCEPTUAL to basically shuttle employees and tenants over to the building. To the extent that they do that, maybe we should have some detail on that so we can get comfortable with that aspect as well. We have a few other issues that you've probably read within the letter, and I'm going to introduce David Waite. He's our counsel representing us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. My name is David Waite, and yes, I am the legal representative for Stone Ridge Capital Partners and the property owner, 4350 Von Carmen LLC, which owns the 4350 site. We did participate in the preparation of a letter, which I know was submitted late this afternoon. Hopefully you've had a chance to review it. I'm not going to recite every point that was raised in the letter. I think the general gist of our comment this evening to the council is we think we're putting the cart before the horse here a little bit in terms of evaluating what the impacts of this project are going to be and how they're going to be evaluated to make sure that this is a successful project for the city when you're combining residential uses with historically office and light industrial uses. This is a fundamental shift, a fundamental change. It may very well be a good and positive change, but one that we believe needs to be thoroughly evaluated in terms of the impacts. In terms of the applicant's presentation tonight by Cole, I think you heard on a number of occasions that when the regulatory plans are submitted with respect to specific parcels, there will be a thoughtful evaluation of what the impacts of the project will be, how those impacts will be mitigated to a level of hopefully less than significant, and how the project will work successfully with the existing uses. But you consistently heard that that's going to come down the road. That's going to happen later in a second process. What I think our fundamental message to you this evening is We think that you can't really move forward tonight until you know what those impacts are going to be and that you can adequately address those impacts through proper mitigation. There's no mitigation that's part of this conceptual integrated plan. You don't see any. It's not part of what's before you this evening. What you're seeing is effectively a pre-zoning to prescribe a certain level of density without a thoughtful or comprehensive or complete analysis of what the impacts are, both internally and externally with respect to the project. So you can't really evaluate what this means in terms of how this is going to work until a more thoughtful environmental analysis is done. And that's essentially what our legal position is that you can't really act on the project this evening without having conducted that environmental analysis as required under the California Environmental Quality Act. To move forward this evening, in our view, would essentially be splitting this project up into component parts when in fact they're really all part of the same project. What you're doing tonight is taking the first step in a series of regulatory actions to approve a project. The next step will occur, the regulatory plans that will then come before you. And what we're essentially saying is we're not opposed to this project. We're simply saying that the project needs to be thoroughly evaluated in terms of the impacts and appropriately mitigated. What I think you heard from Kyle was he's not sure how this is going to work. How is it going to affect his parking? How is it going to affect his circulation? How is it going to affect the pedestrian access to his building? How are the other adjacent uses going to necessarily render themselves compatible with the existing uses on the site? Again, we're not going to know that until we see the regulatory plans and the more thoughtful environmental analysis. So essentially what we're saying is we think this ought to be deferred until you've had that analysis, until CEQA has been complied with, until you have a supplemental or a focused EIR which thoroughly evaluates the impact of this project on the existing land uses so that you can make a thoughtful evaluation of what those impacts are, how they will be mitigated. That, of course, will drive the changes to the CC&Rs that will occur between and among the property owners with respect to reciprocal easements and the covenants that exist. Your mitigation measures will drive those changes. But right now, we don't have those because they haven't been evaluated. So that's essentially our message this evening. We think that you ought not move forward tonight. We think you ought to defer this until you've seen a complete and thoughtful analysis of what the impacts of this project are and how they will be mitigated. With that, that's really essentially what we have for you this evening. I think the rest of it's detailed in our letter. I thank you for your time.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Brian Adams, and I represent the owners of Courthouse Plaza. What do we have here? Okay. Anyways, where's the pointer? And you all have, I think, a letter. There we go. You all have a letter that you've received from us. This is our project here. I represent these 4 building owners. And I've sent all a letter to you that you all should have received and is in the packet, so I'm not going to go ahead and repeat all that stuff for you today. But I just want to address a couple of issues that Ms. McDermott and also the attorneys for CONCEPTUAL have addressed in their rebuttal to my letter. And first and foremost, this is the easement area here, which is in kind of that we are focusing on here tonight, at least I am. And Ms. McDermott mentioned that this easement is unrestricted, which is completely untrue. Their attorneys have proclaimed that, again, this is an unrestricted easement, and that is not true. You guys can go ahead and read the easement, but the easement is a document that provided a private access to CONCEPTUAL. It was not an easement to provide public access via public streets, which these streets are all proposed to be public. And this street here is going to dump right into our easement. So this is not a public access easement, never was a public access easement, and it never will be a public access easement. So the public will have no access across that easement. It's not a public easement. Secondly, this easement, and their attorneys can answer this question for you, I'm sure, was never granted to anyone in this property here. This access is going to be opened up. These public streets are going to be opened up, and it'll provide access to all these properties. Can come through here, go to this park, and directly go across our private easement. So again, that's a pretty clear issue, and I think it's probably enough on that. The other thing is regarding this connectivity. The Planning Commission has dictated that this Birch Street access has to be in place for this plan to be acceptable to the Planning Commission. And really, this access is not going to exist to the public. There is going to be no connectivity. The LU-23, the general plan, shows this as a public street all the way out to here. Well, it's not a public street. Connexent cannot make it a public street, and essentially approval of this conceptual plan is approving something that's fiction. There is not going to be a public street here. And therefore, we strongly think that you need to consider the fact that approving this conceptual plan is not in conformance with Roma's guidelines for providing that public access to Birch Street. And I think that pretty much encompasses what we want to say. So really what we would like to do is request that you as a city council tonight have an opportunity to solve this problem and not have Cole and Connexent burden our property with their traffic and other issues. And the real simple solution is for them to take their driveway here with Teller and provide access across Cole's property to Birch Street. And where it doesn't burden our property, all the traffic impacts on their property. Cole and Connexent have agreed to tie themselves at the hip in this project, and it's supposed to be an integrated plan. So they are responsible and should be responsible for solving this issue on their own property. And I think that sums it up. So we would request at this point, as the other gentleman just mentioned, that you guys consider delaying this issue until Cole and Connexent get together. And just to mention, they have never come to us and asked us about any of our concerns. We've phoned, sent letters to them, and essentially all we've got at this point was a letter that says, bug off, you're not important, don't worry about it. So we would ask that you delay this until you have a chance to consider Cole and Connexent solving this by moving this access to Birch over into this area over here and relieving the burden on our property. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to ask them. Otherwise, I think it's all pretty clear in the details of my letter.
Good question. Councilmember Daigle?
No, for the city attorney.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Okay, thanks.
You want to ask it now?
Yes, if the city's legal representative, if you could address the issues that have been brought up as far as the...
Well, can we? I thought it was just a specific question. Let me ask for additional comments, then maybe we can get to all of one fell swoop. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak? Please come forward.
Good evening. I'm Tom Muller with Manat, Phelps, and Phillips, representing Connexent, one of the applicants tonight. First, I'd like to address Mr. Waite's comments. With great respect, sincerely, for Mr. Waite, I disagree with him. He said that this is the first step in a long chain of approvals for a project here. It is not. It's the second step. And at the first step, when you adopted the 2006 General Plan Amendment, you thoroughly evaluated the impacts of the development of up to 2,200 units in exactly this area. In fact, in the general airport area, 4,300 residential units, almost 5 million square feet of office, 880,000 square feet of commercial, and 1,200 hotel rooms. This has been very thoroughly analyzed. There is nothing about what we're proposing today in a conceptual plan, this is just a conceptual plan, that would have had to have changed any word in the 2006 EIR. It's all the same. In fact, everything we're doing today could have been in the 2006 EIR and General Plan Amendment, but as I understand it, there was not time to do it under the schedule you were under. So this is not a change from the 2006 General Plan. This is exactly what was called for in the General Plan. You have evaluated it at a schematic level, and until we get approval at this phase, at the conceptual phase and at the coordination of the two plans, we can't develop the kind of detail that you would need in order to do an EIR. So if you adopted Mr. Waite's theory of it, we'd be in a catch-22 where we could keep proposing plans which would not be approved, and then we'd have to go back, which would be an expensive and rather difficult exercise. So the point of this is, under the aegis of the 2006 EIR, to adopt this slight additional detail to what's already in the general plan so that we have the information we need, the agreement that we need to go forward, each of the two applicants here, to develop those plans and to develop the EIRs that will let you know what's going to happen if you approve them. Mr. Waite considers the adoption of the IBC vision plan to be a substantial change. We do not. We think the adoption of a vision plan is not a change in itself. If somebody were proposing to actually build 15,000 units now, we'd have an argument, but I wouldn't be persuaded even by that. If they had approved 15,000 units, there'd be more to discuss, but nobody's approved 15,000 units over there. It's just a vision plan. My understanding, we had a chance, notwithstanding the late arrival of the letter, we did have a chance to discuss this with staff. And my understanding is that the vision plan is not 15,000 brand-new units on a open field that were never proposed before. It is, for the most part, a reconfiguration of an intensity of development that has already been envisioned for those parts of Irvine for a long time. So it's not a substantial change. I think it's, in fact, specifically intended not to be a substantial change, even on the merits. Turning to the easement issue, I will test your patience briefly by reading you the entire relevant portion of the easement. Aetna, which is essentially the Adams interests, hereby grants to Rockwell, which is Connexent, a non-exclusive easement for passage in, over, and along the following real property situated in Orange County, California, including the right to maintain driveways, roadways, sidewalks, and passageways on said property. I didn't hear the word private. I didn't hear the word public. This is an easement for the use of the people who own and occupy the Connexent property, what is now the Connexent property, to come and go from the private, from this project to the public street over this area that has already been indicated here. These streets are not going to be public streets. They are all going to be privately owned but developed to public street standards, so they operate as that. One of Mr. Adams' concerns was that people on this coal development here who do not have the right to use the easement unless they're going to or from something on the Connexent property will come down Von Carmen along this easement and wend their way back up here when they could just go like that. That defies my imagination. I suppose it's possible, and I suppose signs could be posted saying, coal people don't take the long way, take the short way, but I just don't think that's a realistic concern. Finally, we did hear from the Adams interests in March of this year. We responded with a letter outlining our ownership of the easement, the fact that it is unrestricted, it is unconditional, it is not limited, there is no intent such as the Adams interests suggest in their letter. In fact, their vision of the intent is entirely contrary to history. What we had here is an exclusive easement in which the Adams had no interest whatsoever, and after that we were willing to, or our predecessor in title was willing to allow them to also use the easement for their use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Next speaker, please. All right, let's wait. Are there any other speakers? All right, then, Carol, we're going to give you 5 minutes to summate.
Sure. I will not need 5 minutes. Carol McDermott. I just think that I would like to emphasize a couple of things which have been stated but deserve to be emphasized for the record. The first fact is that it is early in the process. Conceptual means early. And we fully intend to get to the level of detail that we're being requested by one of the speakers this evening during the regulatory plan. That's the process that's been outlined by the general plan. And I just would like to mention a couple of things since parking seemed to be an issue with Mr. Weichert, and that is we're required to do a parking management plan. We are indicated that the parking in our structures is going to be separated between the residential and the office. We want that for them as much as they do. And we have a process that will be followed to do that. The city staff will find that a necessary component of our regulatory plan, and we're committed to doing so. And with regard to the construction phasing, that is, once again, part of the regulatory plan, and one which, as we get closer to the level of details, that's what we work out. How we create that gets covered in the parking management plan. So we think that the city has enough conditions of approval. They have enough regulations contained in the document of the ICDP itself, and we will continue to have to be consistent with the general plan. So with all of that, we would just continue to ask your support for this plan and recognize that we still have a long ways to go and a whole lot of regulations to get through before we can proceed with development. So again, we have a lot of people here that could answer questions if you need them, including the property owners' representatives and legal counsel and architectural counsel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, I think Councilmember Daigle had a question.
Yes, for the city's legal representative, I know there's some intricacies between the property owners and the tenants and the parking lots and so on. At this stage, in terms of the issues that are within the city's jurisdiction, are you okay with us proceeding?
I am. What we have to do is keep in mind what this plan is doing and not doing. And it's been constantly and repetitively said it's conceptual. You are not bound by this. You are essentially adopting an illumination or fleshing out of the general plan policies. It's not a specific plan. It gives no regulatory authority. There are no entitlements being conferred. It's a concept that is necessary for the parties in order to have a structure to build all the necessary documents on and conduct the environmental review. As far as the interlocking property interests, there have been two issues raised that I'm aware of. One relates to the easement. It's the city's position that in order to make this project proceed, then the applicants have to come forward with the easements and access that's provided or make alternative arrangements for it. We're not going to put ourselves between the applicants and the opposing property owners. That ultimately is for them to work out. It's not for us to work out. You don't have to make that determination tonight, and it's not appropriate for us to make that determination tonight. With respect to the CCNRs, it's been said that that is, in fact, private owners' interest. I agree. It's not an issue you need to be concerned about tonight. What you need to address, if the council so desires, is this a concept upon which you're willing to see plans later come forward that put flesh on it that you would consider to subsequently grant any entitlements after full and complete environmental review. I would also share that on the environmental review front, this is not a situation like what was going on with Irvine, as the IBC has been raised. That's a different situation where they were technically increasing caps and removing caps, increasing further development rights. What we have to keep in mind is all of the rights that are being given a little more flesh in this context were previously granted in the context of the general plan. So I believe we're on sound ground. You certainly have the plan before you, but you do not need to stop based upon legal impediments.
Okay. Thank you for covering easement, environmental, and the CCNRs. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Selleck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the two property owners here have done a really good job of doing what we asked them to do in the general plan, and that is come up with an intermediate concept between their regulatory plans and the general plan that really dealt with some key issues we identified in the general plan. One of them, which is the most overriding issue, was just the allocation of the residential dwelling units, the additive dwelling units. Then we had a number of public improvements that we wanted to see go in, the parks, the pedestrian ways, the roadway and the circulation system. So this lays down the backbone concepts for them to further refine their plans and move ahead. And I think they've done a good job. It's difficult for property owners in a situation like this to come to terms and resolve these issues. There's a lot of work they still have to do with their other property interests that reside on those properties, but that's something for them to do. We've got the backbone laid out here, and they've got their work cut out for them, and they can go ahead and do it if we approve this tonight. So I'm in favor of what they've proposed and support moving ahead with it.
Mr. Hand.
Yeah, just at the risk of bending the nail on the other side of the board, Mr. City Attorney, if we accept this plan tonight, this conceptual plan, and later we find out that there was a fatal flaw in it that it can't proceed, we have full authority and discretion to change that, to do something else without any sort of repercussions. Is that correct?
That's correct. You're not bound by this, and you could make an amendment and process it legislatively if that was your choice.
Mr. Webb.
I'm always interested in making some slight modifications, so I'd like to suggest a couple of simple modifications to the implementation plan, which will, I think, handle one of my concerns, as well as perhaps allow a little bit more flexibility in another concern. And the first is my concern about bicycles. And under the implementation plan, there's a section that talks about, it's in paragraph 2 in sentence 1, it says the regulatory plans will in substantial compliance with the integrated conceptual development plan, describe more fully the produced design of buildings, parking, streets, pedestrian, and then it goes on to say ways. I suggest that we add in pedestrian and bicycle ways, which the applicant seems to agree to in that one sentence. So I'm just asking that "and bicycles" be added to that paragraph. On the easement issue, the Planning Commission added some pretty specific wording that indicated that easement that comes off of the north needs to be as shown on figures 1, 2, and 3 of the Integrated Conceptual Development Plan. Since this is a conceptual development plan, there may be some options to modify it beyond what is shown on this drawing here. So I think that if we can modify that sentence to still maintain the ability to get access out to Birch Street, which I think is extremely important in this instance, because if you look at the shape of the Connection property, you have the main access down at the very bottom, the Jamboree. There's a mid-access that's unsignalized at Jamboree Road, kind of in the middle. And there's a little bit of a piece that's down at the bottom again, going out to Von Carmen. So that I think it's extremely important to allow those people that are going to be in the upper portions of that Connection development to have some access out to Birch Street. So I would suggest that in, again, implementation paragraph number 3, sentence number 1, that we remove the requirement that it has to be as shown on figures 1, 2, and 3 of the integrated plan, and just at the end of that sentence we'll say something to the effect that the connectivity between the Cole and Connection residential villages must be maintained from Birch Street to the Connection resident village. So rather than specifically saying it has to be shown as on the figure, just indicate that it has to be connected to Connection.
I would support those changes. I just want to say, having worked on the general plan, that this concept is right on target. I mean, we talked about workforce housing. People could work and live basically in the same place, or at least our teachers, policemen, firemen, women, people could perhaps live in the city because we have higher density, which of course means the housing prices won't be quite so great. This is designed to get people out of their cars so they can walk around the areas. There'll be some retail to support the people who live there. So as a concept, I think it's just absolutely in tune with the general plan. And I think we're all in agreement that if the parking is not what people want, there's going to be plenty of opportunity to make the protests and for us to examine it and make those changes that we may demand to satisfy certain needs as we go down the road. So I also support this.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to be offered?
Sure. I just want to make sure everyone is okay with the access issue being treated that way at Birch. Okay.
As Don suggested.
Yes, yes. Okay, well, I view this plan as an example of the joint power of private investment and public guidance to try and revitalize the lands, and it's something that took about 5 years to put together. And just want to note a lot of assistance from Councilman Selich and our Assistant City Manager, Sharon Wood, to make this happen. And Councilman Webb was a little bit involved as well. So I would move the action with Councilman Webb's modifications.
All right, motion and second. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, please vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Item 24, I understand the applicants requested that this be continued. Mr. Rosansky, would you like to make a motion?
I move the continue the action.
For 45 days. Motion and second. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak on item 24? All right, to please vote on the motion to continue.
Before you do that, I'm sorry, Mayor Curry. Mr. Campbell is saying that if we take it to a date certain, then we don't have to read notice.
Can we continue to
yeah,
November 9th?
Let's continue it to November 9th.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sure that's what Mr. Rosansky meant.
So I'll amend my motion to November 9th. Thank you.
Okay. No discussion. Please vote.
Yes. Okay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments.
Public comments are invited on non-agenda items generally considered to be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record.
Please come forward if you have public comments on items not on the agenda. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close public comments, and we will go to current business, item 25, the implementation of the recommendations of the Technology Task Force.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. As we promised you, we would report back on the second meeting in September with our analysis and recommendations from the Citizens Technology Task Force, which did some really good work here a couple of months ago. So I asked Assistant City Manager Smith to take a look at this. I'm going to ask her to make some comments about what our recommendation is.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. The committee did make some great recommendations. I want to just walk you really quickly through what we've already started to implement and where we think we're going to go with this. The top 2 recommendations that the committee provided us was to, 1, centralize your management and put a technology manager, CIO, in place. We're already moving towards putting together a job description. City Manager Kiff's idea, and I like it a lot, was to create the Business Improvement and Technology Manager. And that's really speaking to the fact that technology really is a tool for good business practices. And we want this position to be something broader than just technology, but to really look at our systems, look at the way we do our business, and adapt our technology to that. So we're in the process of building that job description. It will be located, that centralization, that person will be located in the city manager's office, and we are beginning that process now of consolidating the resources and the staffing under that particular position. There's many advantages to creating a centralized position. Right now we're very decentralized, which means every department out in the city has to have its own expertise in technology, negotiating contracts. And we have found that we've lacked some economies of scale and the ability to leverage our contracts, our maintenance agreements, and other kinds of things. So we think there's great advantage to doing this. The second recommendation should be a no-brainer. It's to create a strategic plan. And the strategic plan will be vital to setting priorities, your priorities, the city manager's priorities, and the priorities for doing business. We've already begun to look at the strategic planning effort by creating a small internal group, which I'll talk about next. As part of the strategic planning effort, we're also working on a contract to bring in a consultant from the private sector to help us guide this strategic planning process and build on the work of the committee. Finally, the third recommendation was to form an advisory group. We certainly will do that, made up of primary users. In the interim, we've already put a group together. We asked for letters of interest from end users within the departments who have a strong interest in IT. That includes the police department, the library, public safety, admin services, and that group is already functioning. Long term, the advisory group will work to advise the city manager as well as the business improvement and technology manager about core priorities. And then finally, items 4 and 5, increase our transparency in government and consolidate our IT infrastructure. There's certainly a lot of cost savings in consolidating that, but those 2 ideas will be embedded in the strategic planning effort and will be set as part of the priorities. That's about as quick as I could go on that. We're very excited about it, and I think the staff is excited about it. So
well
that
done.
concludes
That was a very good report.
the
Thank you.
presentation. You're welcome.
Just
Councilmember Gardner.
a question on number 5.
Yes.
Will it be prepared so by the time we get to the new city hall that any ideas we have will be built into the infrastructure?
I think that's a must.
Okay.
We will begin. We want to move very, very quickly on the strategic plan, particularly this component of infrastructure, and we'll be working with Steve Beadham's group on that.
Mr. Selch.
Yeah. Why would this program work better than just outsourcing the entire IT function and going to an outside company?
I think that's something you analyze within the strategic plan level to see whether aspects of IT should be outsourced or all of it should be outsourced. And as we say that, knowing that at least at this point in the city's technology, we have a lot of homegrown, home-adjusted technology plans that don't work so well to be contracted out. Although arguably we need to move in that direction where we do take off-the-shelf things. We could host our servers elsewhere. So I do expect the strategic plan to evaluate that and move us to that place where that is a more viable option than it is today, whether or not you choose to take it and I choose to recommend it.
What's an example of a homegrown program?
One of them is we have a customer relationship management program that works fairly well, but it's not off the shelf. It's one that we developed. We also, if you look at our budget program right now, there's a lot of very specific things that we've had to amend to it to make it work for our payroll system, for our budgeting system. Those are things that we need to move away from, but we would need to purchase that type of product elsewhere as we move away from it. So right now it's fairly costly, arguably, to have that supported by an agency other than the people that have worked on it the most.
So you're saying you haven't thrown the idea out that it's going to be part of the 5-year IT strategic plan? Is that what you're saying?
I believe that we need to aggressively look at contracting out in many different fields, including this one, if that answers your question.
I'll take it for now.
Okay.
Get you off the hot seat.
Thank you. Mr. Hen.
Well, in further answer to that issue, there's lots of opportunities here that actually don't even relate to people associated with outsourcing. This whole idea of the infrastructure being somewhere else is really person neutral, if you will. And so I'm absolutely convinced that you're on the right track here with the 5-year plan development and the combining of a business improvement as well as IT function here at the top. And so those two key things, a lot will flow from those two key things as you go through the process. I note here that it's a kind of a curious comment here about appointment of an acting business improvement and technology manager. Is that inside or outside, or would you prefer not to comment on that at this point?
I think we have a candidate or two that might work well from the inside, but we're still kind of evaluating that as to the timing of that and the necessity at this point.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Dana. Good report. Next item, item 26, Clearwire Telecommunications Facility Permit. Mr. City Manager or Mr. Campbell?
You know,
I'm sorry. Excuse me. Public comment. Please come forward. I'm sorry, Laura. Excuse me.
Good evening. My name is Laura Curran. I was looking at this, listening to a report, which is helpful, and just trying to understand the Chief Information Officer role and the consultant role in the strategic plan, because many times you bring in a CIO and then that person brings in a lot of consultants, and sometimes that works well and sometimes that doesn't. But in this case, we're bringing in qualified folks with a lot of strategic planning background. We're bringing in a CIO. It's a CIO or a business technology manager whom I assume would have some qualifications to look at business process and integration and outsourcing. And so it would be interesting to understand how they tie together, the CIO versus the consultant, and any sense of an envisioned budget. And if that's not in here today, when will the proposed budget for a consultant, timeframes, areas of responsibility come forward, and the reporting? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to that?
Sure, I can respond to that. The budget, the commitment we made to the city manager is that the budget will not expand beyond what we currently provide in IT services today. One of our challenges is actually identifying all of those funds and how they're spent throughout the departments. So one of the things this interim committee that's been put together is to begin to look at new ways of funding appropriately the resources that spread appropriately across the departments for what they use, and consolidate that and put it into something that we can manage. The business improvement technology manager will probably take us 4 to 5 months to recruit and get on board. We can execute a contract much quicker and begin working on the strategic plan with a consultant, and there were some very fine consultants on the technology committee that already would probably bid on this that have a base of understanding of the city, its operations, and have spent a lot of time looking at it. So we're trying to jumpstart, maybe the answer back to you, we're trying to jumpstart the strategic planning process by bringing a consultant on while we're recruiting for the business technology improvement manager position. And we've got really capable staff from inside the city that will also staff this, this strategic planning committee. And we'll come back with full reports. But the integration is, from my perspective, is to try to get us moving very quickly on the strategic plan, to try to consolidate our budgets and take a look at all of the pieces, what goes first, what goes second. We've got the City Hall site looming out there that we have to make some hardware decisions on. So I don't know. I don't see long-term this particular consultant staying with the city, but it is, I think it's important for us to move quickly, and this will help us jumpstart it.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, I apologize for missing that. Thank you. And now we'll move on to item 26, Councilmember Daigle.
Yes, I'll be recusing myself.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell.
Mayor Curry and members of the council, this is a telecommunications permit for Clearwire. They're proposing to add some additional antennas on the roof of an apartment building at Park Newport. It's within an existing screened enclosure, and the new facility won't be visible from public view. There'll be a couple of cabinets on the ground as well that won't be visible inside the enclosures. This does come to the City Council because the antennas are above the height limit, and it's in a residential district. We do believe there's facts to support the necessary findings for approval of this application, and we recommend approval. If you have any questions, I'm available.
Councilor Gardner.
They're higher than they're supposed to be, but they're matching the ones that already exist. Isn't that right?
Correctly, yes.
So we're not really adding anything in terms of a new impact.
No.
As far as visibility or anything else?
None whatsoever. It's behind an existing screened enclosure, and they won't be any taller than the existing antennas.
Thank you. Mr. Rosansky?
Just like to move the item.
Okay. Second. Motion and second. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak on this matter? All right. Seeing none, please vote.
With Councilmember Daigle recusing herself, the motion carries.
Okay. Item 27, second reading on the Morningside Recovery Development Agreement. Mr. Kiff.
I'm going to pass this one to the city attorney, Mr. Hunt.
Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Kiff. The agenda item tonight is for second reading of the ordinance that would basically finalize the development agreement that was before you 2 weeks ago to enter into with the Morningside Recovery. It does essentially what we spoke about 2 weeks ago, the highlights of which is enters into an agreement with Morningside limiting the amount of beds that they may have in the city, 30 in the peninsula zone, 36 citywide, so 6 outside of the peninsula zone. Has operating conditions that it adopts with respect to the Morningside facilities. It identifies its current locations and deals with issues should they wish to move the locations in the future. The analysis of staff is that it creates a public benefit for the city as a whole because the regulations absent this development agreement are far less advantageous to the citizens of the city. In that regard, we would recommend that the council adopt the ordinance and second reading of the development agreement, and therefore it would take effect within 30 days of the actual adoption of the ordinance.
All right, thank you. Let me invite anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this matter. Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Ken Coleman. I live on 39th Street on the peninsula, and I recently taken some photos which I had delivered to Mr. Hunt's office on the 23rd of September. I didn't get any feedback until about 3 o'clock this afternoon, but I did put some pictures together. I blew up of pictures I had taken of Morningside, and as you can see, this is where I take walks every once in a while, and you can see where the traffic is jammed. This is on the street right behind Violito, and this goes on for about 30 minutes, and they're putting people in the vans, and they're taking off from there, and it's right in the business center. It takes about 30 minutes before they unload. which means that they're already not complying with the operation conditions, number 9 and number 12, client transport, which is part of the agreement. Both of these are not being met right now. So this may seem minor to you, but really, if you don't obey the simple traffic laws being broken only 2 minutes away from the City Hall, do you really think that they're going to comply with the rules and say that you're laying down with this agreement? We were told by the ADP Compliance Department the state of California is broke right now, and there's nothing they can do. They have no money to enforce any rules broken by these operators. So so who's going to police all these grandfathered rehab businesses? I don't know. Are you? Who is? So that's my question. This is basically what's going on right now, which is not complying with the agreement.
Ken, I'm having a little trouble. Exactly where is that?
It's behind Morningside's offices on the street behind Via Lido.
Oh, okay. Via Porto.
Via Porto.
In Lido Marina Village.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's where they're at. And this is what it looks like for about 30 minutes. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Are there other speakers? Please come forward.
Good evening. Lori Morris, West Newport. I'm assuming that we're given 5 minutes. I don't know. Usually it's 3 minutes.
We'll probably do it for 3 minutes. Do you? Okay.
No. Okay, so I'll make it quick. I asked a question and was finally answered after 2 weeks. Apparently I was left out of the loop, and it was my inquiry. Morningside Recovery has quietly opened an intake center just 100 yards away from their business office on Via Lido, the one you just saw there. It has a key card entry, which is interesting. I have excellent sources, business owners, who actually were told that this was to be a clinic with a nurse available to dispense narcotics to Morningside clients. I found this out by accident. Did the city know before we, the public, did? Do any of you even walk the short distance from these offices to the Morningside mothership and witness the daily van parade that jams that street and blocks traffic for upwards of 30 minutes? Because it's a 30-second drive, a 2-minute walk, and that's what goes on all the time. Dave Kiff answered me that no, this is just an extra intake office area. And is this the vision you had, Mr. Henn, of that village? Because I didn't think that's what it was going to be. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen there, but it looks like Morningside will be taking over that entire district. This address, as was the Lido Island address, was conveniently left out of the proposal put before Planning and this City Council. So ask yourselves, are you really going to enter into a 25-year agreement with a business that has been so underhanded and shady with their dealings? The same Morningside who has their only ADP licensed house sitting directly above a huge party house on 39th Street. And there's pictures of that too, and it was also in the Orange County Register. Is that where they do their detox? Is it going to be the Lido address that wasn't in the agreement? Is it going to now be that address that's on Via Porto with the key card entry? I don't know if anybody here in the city knows that, and it would be good to find out. If you're taking it at their word, I'd be cautious. This entire rehab problem goes all the way back to our ex-city attorney, Bob Burnham, and his actions to remove the conditional use permitting process that allowed this nightmare to take over our city. And again, why? I and others in the community have been asked for information by a federal government agency for the timelines and lineage of this process. My biggest fear right now is that we're going to be embarrassed, like the city of Bell, over what the actions of ex-city employees, ex-city attorneys, and over their later greedy enrichment by working for, with, and creating their own rehab profiteering business in our city. And you guys know who those people are. This is shameful, and in my opinion, a bunch of horseshit.
Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Laura Curran. So I attended the hearing on September 14th of the council, as well as the Planning Commission hearing in June. So my comments reflect that. Well, based on the September 14th discussion, it appears that there was a lack of substantive discussion, which indicates an intent to pass the agreement at hand wholesale. So I understand that. However, I want to just reaffirm that the agreement is riddled with an exceptional number of exceptions, which should give you pause, and which are still in your power to ameliorate. So let's catalog those. So first of all, we have the river exception. Though Section 3, Number 5 of the agreement specifies that only one treatment home is allowed per block and no facilities are allowed facing each other, an exception is being made at 505, 5015A, and 5015B River, which actually sit on top of each other. Now, per Mr. Hunt, our city attorney, on September 14th, we have been assured that this is an exception. Now, let's talk about the Lido exception to that exception. The Lido facility is 3 units that are contiguous at Via Lido and Via Antibes, number 100 and number 102, and the exception from River is being transferred to this multi-unit facility. This facility, I would say, creates a quantity exception. So since there's actually no limit on the number of units which can be consolidated into a single operating facility, at least that I can find in the agreement. So, as we see, this operation, which is not yet in place, will benefit from these exceptions and will contribute to the consolidation and the burden on the residents and on those in treatment. So I would call that also the documentation exception. It's so special, this exception for the multi-unit facilities, that I can't find it in the operating conditions of the report where the facilities are listed, nor can I find it in the other amendments on page 4 of the summary, which outline the conditions for having these multi-unit facilities. If it is there, I have not found it. Next, another exception is the hearing exception. These facilities have been exempted from the public hearing process, which is a key part of the group homes ordinance which the council passed. This eliminates the public opportunity for dialogue, and it's unclear why. Because even if the intent and the outcome is to include these facilities in the agreement, the public and the operator should have that opportunity for dialogue, and the operator should go through that process the same as all of the other operators have. Finally, I really think of all of these as the logic exceptions. No reasonable explanations have been given for these exceptions from the group homes ordinance and from the proposed agreement. Particularly with the multi-unit facilities at River and in the future at Lido, there's been no explanation provided or ground shown that the operator, Morningside Recovery, cannot operate effectively under the single unit per block guidelines. So in closing, I take exception to the defects in the agreements, and I ask you to reconsider the provisions so that the agreement is consistent, fair, enforceable, and in the best interest of Newport Beach residents for the next 25 years.
Thank you, Laura.
members of council.
Any other speakers, please? Please come forward.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is Mary Helen Beatificato, and I represent Morningside Recovery. Here with me is CEO of Morningside Recovery, Candace Bruce. I just want to address a couple of things. Morningside Recovery is not operating an intake center here in Newport Beach, nor are they operating any sort of detox facility. We do have a place where we do detox, but it's in the city of Costa Mesa, and we have been upfront about that with the city. As Ms. Bruce spoke 2 weeks ago at the city council meeting, it is Morningside Recovery's full intent to comply fully with the development agreement. We are working very closely with the city and also the residents here of the city of Newport Beach to maintain going forward good relations with both the city and the citizens. And I know personally that Ms. Bruce has been in contact with a few of the citizens and has actually engaged in meetings trying to, see what their concerns are and how Morningside can go about not only maintaining what they do, but to keep good relations with the citizens. So Ms. Bruce is here if you have specific questions, but other than saying that absolutely there's nothing that Morningside's hiding about what its operations or its intents going forward is.
Thank
so
you.
If you don't have any other questions, I would urge you to adopt this.
Not so much a question for you, but for Ms. Bruce, she saw the photographs of the van congestion and perhaps can comment on that.
Yes, and I actually think they left, but we didn't see the photos all too well. But
Yeah, Candace Bruce, good evening. I couldn't really see the photos, so they were this way, so I can't really comment on it until I.
Well, do you want to describe them, Dave? We can give them to you.
Yeah, Kenneth, they look, this is the first time I'd seen them. This is the little narrow street behind your offices there, but next to the parking lot.
Okay,
And
back.
they showed probably about 4 vans kind of coming and going, about 3 of them parked. And it looked like on both sides of the street. I'm not familiar with the parking regulations back there, but
Okay.
that's what the picture shows.
I know that there are times that the van pulls around the back and might let a client out. I can't imagine they were double parked. If they were, then I would certainly address it with our drivers. They're not supposed to double park. They're aware of the rules, and I can certainly reiterate that.
If we're consistent with the route plan, is there a concern about having the folks load and unload on Violito?
Not at all.
Okay.
No, in fact, we met about that yesterday, about moving
Okay.
it around to the front. There's a loading zone right there.
Okay.
And so using that is, in fact, it's effective tomorrow.
So, in effect, a constructive reaction then to this issue and a way to solve it, to the extent it was a problem.
Well, that certainly is the way to solve it, is to move it around to the front. And regarding the office space down the street that was mentioned, it's like Mary Helen said, it's not a detox facility, it's not an intake office. In fact, it's an office where they can perform psychological testing. It's a question-answer thing. There's no medical procedures or otherwise performed there.
Okay. I did have a couple other quick questions here. For the city attorney, this additional location in Violito and Lido Marina Village, is that, I presume that use is perfectly acceptable use under the zoning for Lido Marina Village, is that correct?
It's an acceptable use. It's consistent with the regulations that affect that area.
And is that, the opening of that location within the purview of the document that we're approving tonight? I mean,
No, actually, it's not. It's not a treatment facility. It's not a sober living home. It doesn't provide client beds. It's not covered by the DA.
So there would have been no reason for that there would have been no disclosure requirement, I suppose, in conjunction with these hearings associated.
Correct. That would not be subject to the agreement and no disclosure requirement because it is consistent with existing zoning and does not provide for client beds.
Okay, this issue of 50-15 A and B being a so-called exception, not exactly sure what that meant, but it didn't seem to me it's an exception to anything. I mean, our dispersal concept here that's been applied to both sober living and in this Morningside agreement talked about facilities, in other words, an over-under situation like that being one location. I know that's how we viewed it in the sober living agreement. Is that consistent with your understanding, or?
At present, what's going on with that facility is it's a pre-existing facility that's subject to the agreement and is negotiated in the resolution of the case. This particular agreement with Morningside does not have the same provisions in it that sober living does, that sober living has exceptions that Ms. Curran's talking about to some of the separation requirements. They don't exist in this particular agreement. What we have is a situation where that one is, if you will, grandfathered in based upon the settlement negotiations. And the Violito or the Lido Island facility is a replacement facility as well. So those facilities are met because they're considered in the DA.
And as a matter of record regarding the issue of whether there's a public hearing process for new locations for Morningside under the agreement, my understanding is that was a matter of negotiated outcome as well under that agreement. And
it is. And the thing for the council and the public, if I may, to keep in mind is that this is a substantial reduction of beds and clients for Morningside. It's a negotiated quid pro quo. They have been cooperative. The city's been cooperative. In order to reach an agreement, someone's going to have to give up something. You seldom come up with a one-sided agreement. It resolves existing litigation in a favorable way. I believe it's a win-win situation for Morningside as well as the city, as well as the citizens. Are there compromises? Yes. Is it exactly our ordinance? No. bear in mind, Morningside has taken the position our ordinance does not restrict its ability to perform its job or its stated task. It has accepted our ordinance and, in fact, made itself smaller than would otherwise have been entitled to, even under our ordinance. So this quid pro quo has given the city and the citizens, I think, a significant value.
And I'll ask and answer another question for you. Is this agreement better than what our ordinance would provide? And the answer is yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Significantly so. I'd like to make one other comment, and then I'll move the item. While it is the case that nothing has changed since the first reading and tonight, based upon public comment, other than some clarifications and actually a constructive response to the traffic issue, I wouldn't want anyone to get the impression that there have not been substantive changes and improvements as a result of the public hearing process. In between the time that this appeared at the Planning Commission and the time of the first reading of the ordinance 2 weeks ago, there in fact have been very substantive changes in the original version of this agreement, very substantive, that were enumerated the last time around, that in my view overall dramatically improved the agreement, its enforceability. We talked about who's going to enforce the agreement. Well, the answer is the city's going to enforce it, and this agreement has a much better basis for enforcement than the last draft that we saw. So lest anyone get the idea that public comment and public input is not substantive in this arrangement, I just wanted to point it out that it has been very substantive. We took full account of the public input at the Planning Commission and since the Planning Commission in crafting the draft of this agreement that was first presented 2 weeks ago. And in my view, it's a an ideal example of why it's important for our citizens to participate in this process, that their voices are heard. That doesn't mean to say that everything every citizen would like is adopted by this group, but in total, this is a great example of how citizen input has helped this council craft a better outcome for the benefit of the citizens, and I appreciate that, and I thank our citizens for that, as well as staff and council, not the least of which are you, David. Your participation in this also made a big difference in the quality of the agreement. With that, I'll move the item.
Mr. Mayor, may I just one more public comment? We were asked who was going to enforce the agreement. Certainly what Councilmember Hand said was true, and then I would refer the public to Matt Cozyline of our Code Enforcement Department. He's working closely with the Office of the City Attorney for that purpose, and we appreciate all public comments on that area.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Motion carries unanimously.
Motion for reconsideration.
A motion to reconsider the vote on any action taken by the City Council at either this meeting or the previous meeting may be made only by one of the council members who voted with the prevailing side.
Any motions for reconsideration? Okay, seeing none. We do have an adjournment tonight for one of my friends and neighbors, Elizabeth Betty Casper, who passed away on September 11th. Betty had been a resident of Harbor Ridge for 28 years. Betty and her husband Dick were longtime members of Mariners Church in Irvine and the St. Mary's Armenian Church in Costa Mesa. Betty was known for her intelligence and wit and was actively involved in numerous church and community activities, was a loving and devoted wife and mother, and a very talented artist. She is survived by her husband, Dr. Richard Casper, son Dennis Casper, daughter Marilyn Beck, and her granddaughter Ashley and Alexandria Casper, and Matthew Davis and Lori Davis. Services have been held, and the family request donations be made to Mariners Church, Richard and Elizabeth Casper Seminary Trust Fund, a trust that Betty and Richard created in 1987 to assist seminary students.